And the first topic that we wanted to discuss, I was in Stuttgart on the weekend on Sunday. It was a incredible football match between Leverkusen, who will actually be a topic in the show later today, and Stuttgart, and a back and forth. And I shouldn't have been so surprised, those two, when they play each other. It's always a great time. I actually hope it's a German Cup final because I think that would be absolutely incredible. But Stuttgart are in a weird place. We had a few subscribers mentioning in the article that post match, that they are frustrated with Stuttgart's season. I get that, but I think they themselves would say that they're very much on course of where they are at. The goal was always to finish in the top half of the table. They are there right now. There's probably they themselves will admit there's too many points dropped, and there's too many players that haven't really fulfilled the promise that they expected them from them this year. And one of those players is Enzo Millot. He had a great start to the season. He's a fantastic playmaker. He was with the Olympic team, the French Olympic team this summer, right? And maybe that's showing now. It's a lot of football that this guy had to play. Regardless, there has been some rumors now linking him with a move away from Stuttgart. Bild reporting that Arsenal, Tottenham, and Saudi clubs have shown interest. Um, I think this was always a matter of time. I think the one thing that surprises me is the report of an exit clause, 20 million euros. I personally suspect from talking to people that exit clause is a lot higher, Stefan.
Yeah, you would certainly hope so, or I'd have to write another article asking what's the point of Stuttgart. And when we talked about these stories, which stories we wanted to cover, and we discussed this one, I said, "What is it with Stuttgart? These damn exit clauses. They can't help themselves. They've got a player here who is in the French under-21 team. He's done remarkably well in the Bundesliga for Stuttgart over at least the last two seasons. He's gone on leaps and bounds since he joined the club for like what,
One
1.5
po-
million euros,
1.75 million euros.
7.5,
Yeah.
and he's on the cusp of kind of breaking through as a really top class player. I would say. I think he's got everything about him. He can dribble, he can set up passes, he can score goals. I think he's a kind of really classic kind of number 10. Can play out wide as well. So he's obviously very useful. You can totally see why a club like Arsenal or Tottenham would be interested in him, especially if they can't maybe pick up, the first choice players. I'd probably say it's probably more likely that Tottenham would be interested in him than Arsenal, just because Arsenal seem to be more interested in Zubimendi, the Sociedad defence midfielder, who'll probably take up a lot of their transfer budget this summer. And obviously, Milo's more of an attacking player. He does strike me as a very Tottenham player, I must admit. He's very young, he's got bags of potential. He's very dynamic. He can play number 10 across both wings, scores and creates goals at equal measure. And according to this report, Beale would be available for a very decent fee. Even if that fee, I mean, Beale say it's under 20 million euros. Even if it's twice that, even if it's like 30, 35 million euros, I still think that's a bit of a bargain for this guy because he's only 22. He's developing in leaps and bounds at Stuttgart, and he's obviously showing that he's more incapable of playing at the highest level. Because I actually was checking before we started recording, his goals and assists per 90 in the Champions League this season have actually been identical to his goals and assists in the Bundesliga, or at least his goals were. I can't remember if it was both the other, but certainly no sign that he drops off against better teams. He got an assist against Leverkusen at the weekend there. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a no-brainer that a club like Tottenham or Arsenal would be interested in signing him. And I guess unfortunately, Stuttgart are the kind of club that have to kind of sell players at the right time. And we'll just kind of have to wait and see whether this is the right time because, we're kind of hoping that Sebastian Hoeneß will stay put at Stuttgart. We're hoping that this might be a summer where they finally can kind of pump the brakes on this huge turnover of players in and out of the club. And, Stuttgart can maybe go on and build something impressive. But I was speaking to a Stuttgart fan about this in our subscriber chat, and I was saying it'd be great if Stuttgart didn't sell anyone and Hoeneß just had a full pre-season to kind of get this team well drilled and all singing from the same hymn sheet. But unfortunately, football never seems to be that case, and this is just classic Stuttgart. They always let them. I don't want to say they trip themselves up because I understand it's part of the business model, but it feels like, and we've seen this time and time again over the years, they do just have this ability to not only sell their best players, but I think sell them for quite cheap, to be perfectly honest with you, compared to what most Bundesliga clubs would demand for players of similar quality. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. As you said, the release clause might be much higher. He
Yeah.
might stay. It's worth noting that he said in a press conference for a French under 21 team, he says, a departure. Yes, of course, that's a goal I've set for myself. But then he kind of doubled back and said, Stuttgart is a club that promotes young players well. I feel comfortable there. It wouldn't be a failure at all to stay. So I guess he kind of said a bit of both there.
Mm.
But we'll see.
I think I personally, because when I talk to people in Stuttgart, and I mean I was just literally there. Um, it feels like a lot of what's going to happen depends on European qualification. Stuttgart are 10th right now, right? In the Bundesliga standings. They do have a shot at winning the DFB Pokal. You win the DFB Pokal, you're straight in the Europa League, which for a club like Stuttgart is actually wouldn't be the most terrible thing after playing Champions League last year, right? So there is still a chance of winning a trophy, but even then, they're only 5 points behind Freiburg, and 5 points behind Leipzig. Although I do suspect that Leipzig and Frankfurt are probably going to be the favorites for that top four. I know Mainz is in third right now. It's a great story and all that, but like these teams are gonna kick on, and then I think they're just both better too, than Stuttgart, but. I think this exit clause, the talk of an exit clause, and he's available for as little as 20 million euros. The only way I can see that being correct, because I've been told as much as 35 million euros, is that maybe if Stuttgart fail to reach a European spot. Because these are often staggered, right? Like
Mm.
there's different clauses for different clubs. There's usually a clause. Oftentimes there's a clause for the Premier League and other Bundesliga clubs, because we all know the Premier League just pays more. So there's often a clause in there for the Premier League and then for domestic teams. So I personally, this report by Bild, the 20 million euro exit clause, this might be accurate, but it might also be one of those where this is as little as he's available. Um, Also really interesting to note that he currently doesn't have an agent, right? So this isn't one of those things where this was maybe given to Bill by an agent willing to sell. And that always kind of raises an eyebrow too, because like, where did they get the information from and why? Right?
Mm.
Because if it's not an agent out there, like maybe it was the player telling a Bild reporter. I'm not sure what the sourcing is there, but I just suspect that exit clause is higher, Stefan.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the kind of European thing, which I think is a huge factor we have to bear in
Yeah.
mind here. And it's a factor that a lot of these Bundesliga clubs will be kind of sweating over right now. We've talked about Leipzig having to sell players. Dortmund will certainly have to sell players if they'll qualify for the Champions League. And although Stuttgart don't really consider themselves a top four club and certainly don't have pay the wages and things like that of a top four club, they still have to bear in mind that a lot of these
Hmm.
kind of young and very kind of ambitious players would probably want to move on even if there's no release clause. Someone like Enzo Milo might turn around and say, "Look, I'm in the France under 21 squad, and the only way I'm going to get into the France senior squad is if I'm playing in the Champions League for the next couple of years." So it's perfectly understandable if he does kind of want to take stock of things this summer, and if he was to turn around to Stuttgart and say, "I think I've probably achieved everything I can here," then I think people would struggle to argue with that. He's helped Stuttgart get to the Champions League, which is a huge, remarkable achievement. Pokal final, all of that. Um, Aside from winning the Bundesliga or getting to Champions League quarterfinals, then there's not really much else that Stuttgart can do at this point. And I'm sure Sebastian Hoeneß has a whole bunch of things that he wants to do, but it's understandable if a player like Milo would maybe want to move on. But as you said, I guess it'll just come down to how much Stuttgart can get from him in summer if he does move on.
Yeah, I think everything will depend on that. And then also, of course, European qualification. Stuttgart have recently renovated the MHP Arena, it is now called, sponsored by Mercedes. And income from European football for every single home game that they have is massive, right? But you don't play in Europe. That's at least 4 home games gone. That would cost. That would cost money. So yeah, I mean everything is always up in the air when it comes to these when it comes to European football. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of clubs that are sort of on the fringe right now, and the planning is dependent on whether you play Champions League, Europa League, or Conference League, or nothing at all. Stuttgart is certainly in that bubble.